and then we'll begin. Okay, I assume we are live now. So namaste everyone. Namaste to the C20 consultation on philanthropy. As we are aware that C20 is a platform in which the 20 countries which form the G20 come together with their civil society organizations to create and draft a set of policy recommendations that will go on and drive the negotiations and the discussions of the G20 countries before they meet in September. This is a prestigious platform globally, not just for the G20 nations and the world leaders, but also to act as a collective voice of civil society groups globally. In this, there is a very important theme of philanthropy, which affects the life and blood of every civil society organizations globally. And in that philanthropy, today we are discussing an important topic of what are the various models of philanthropy in India. We have four very prominent experts and an expert moderator to join us today. Before we move on to that, just to introduce the organization Sewa International. Sewa International is a global movement with our units present in 32 plus countries, primarily aiming at creating a sense of oneness with the idea of service, with the idea and the joy that service gives. We want to create that emotion of oneness globally. We have Sandeep Khatkekarji with us, who is the Vice President of our USA unit, Sewa USA, and leads the Sewa USA's marketing and fundraising effort. He's also the architect at Apple Media Products Twitter platform and is also been the principal engineer at eBay. Sandeep ji, it's a pleasure to have you moderate this consultation with us and look forward to the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Shubham ji, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on the time zone you're in, because I know we have guests, attendees from all over the world, and we are live right now. Warm welcome to all of you. We are here today to discuss about a very immense topic of immense significance, progressive philanthropy models and their transformative role in Indian society and beyond. We have a very engaging panel of experts today. As we all know, philanthropy has always been a very big part in our Indian culture. For centuries, ordinary citizens have been giving back to their communities in a variety of ways. In Sanskrit, there is a word, dana, which means to give. It is seen as a way to purify mind and heart by developing compassion for others and serving them. So in Indian culture, service is a way to spiritually elevate oneself by doing this positive karma. Traditionally, people have been donating their time, talent, treasure. Nowadays, people give blood, bone marrow, share their skills by tutoring students. But in the modern world, we are witnessing a wave of innovative approaches in philanthropy, ranging for some of the very innovative social impact bonds to social stock exchange, corporate social responsibility initiatives, crowdfunding platforms, various types of government, state, and philanthropic grants. So these initiatives are revolutionizing the way that we give. So the purpose of discussion today is to explore these exciting, cutting-edge models of philanthropy, understand how they are making a positive difference in the lives of individuals and communities. And we have an esteemed panel with a wealth of experience and expertise, representing really diverse backgrounds and sectors. Their valuable insights will shed light to our transformative power of philanthropy. Throughout this discussion, you will You will witness that we will have open exchange of ideas, we'll challenge our conventional wisdom, we'll identify opportunities for collaboration, which is the mantra of today's world. So first of all, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude for each of you panelists that you have your day jobs and you're joining us today, and you will be sharing your valuable insights. Your presence enriches the discussion and promises to make today's discussion really enlightening. Further, I would like to sincerely appreciate all the participants. I know most of them are virtual, all of them are virtual. So you are joining us today is really rewarding. Without further ado, let's embark on this enriching journey into the world of philanthropy. I'm going to start by introducing each of our panelists today. If the organizers can highlight them or spotlight them. First, Dr. Basavaraju Shrestha. Dr. Basavaraju is a social scientist, development professor, CSR consultant, and public policy researcher. He is currently the executive producer of GRAM, the Indian coordinator of C20 Democracy Working Group, along with also being member of Board of Studies at St. Philomena's College, Bannimantab. He is also advisor of Emerging Technology Center. Apart from this, he has also been a member of Karnataka Vision 2025 Sector Specialist Group and author of Skill Development and Employment Vision document for the state in 2017-2018, Job Creation Subcommittee, CII, South India Region Confederation of Indian Industries. Thanks for joining us today and welcome Dr. Basavaraju. Then
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Thank you. Then we have Hemant Gupta. Hemant Gupta ji is the head of Bombay Stock Exchange, Social Stock Exchange. Along with it, he's also being the managing director of BIL Ryzen Technology Startup Incubator Foundation. In the past, he has also been director of Citibank and MD and CEO of BSE Sanman CSR Limited. Thank you for joining us today, Hemanji. Then we have Anurag Gangwar. Anurag ji is the founder and CEO of ImpactVerse, the world's first technology platform to manage impact bonds end-to-end, from design to fundraise to listing and management. He's also part of investment team of International Finance Corporation. Thank you for joining us, Anurag ji. And finally, we have Varun Sheth ji. Varun ji is also co-founder and CEO of Keto, an online crowdfunding platform that allows individuals and corporates, NGOs to raise funds from their favorite social causes and ideas using social media and e-commerce. He has been awarded with awards like Global Impact Regional Honoree for South Asia 2022, Economic Times 40 under 40, Fortunate 40 under 40. So he has great accolades to his profile. Thank you for joining us, Varunji. With
Thank you for having me.
Our panel, I would give a brief outline. What we'll do is first, I'll go through each of your areas of expertise. I'll ask you a few questions and we'll understand each of your areas because some of those areas are really new to many of our audience. And then I'll ask some general questions that are common across all these different platforms that you represent. According to a report by Bain & Company, India's philanthropic sector has been growing at an annual rate of approximately 15% since 2010. That's consistently rising. total philanthropic giving in India has now reached $35 billion in 2022. This showcases the increasing commitment and generosity of individuals and organizations towards making a positive impact. It's fascinating to observe how philanthropy in India has evolved over time, particularly the transition from individual giving to corporate social responsibility and other innovative forms of giving. As I mentioned that the traditional ways had been giving time, talent, and treasure, but now there is a surge of innovative models of philanthropy in India. Like people like to do crowdfunding, there is their own campaigns, they do micro lending, they are investing in social enterprises. So first question, which will be common to all of us, is what do you think are some of these major innovations in philanthropy that has taken place, that are taking place in India? These innovations could be in the form of either frameworks or models of giving, any experiments that are happening, the mindset of philanthropists and philosophies that you have observed, or any unique approaches that you believe have contributed to the growth of philanthropy in India. So I'll go one by one. This is a common question. If you could please share your thoughts by unmuting yourself. First, Dr. Basavarajuji, if you can shed some insights.
Thank you very much, Sandeep ji, and it is my privilege to be amongst this wonderful panelists. Some of them actually I know very personally. It's my due respects to Hemant Gupta ji and all, Shubham, Anurag, and Varun ji, all of you. I'm sure it is going to be a very enriching evening with all these, just panelists. Like as you rightly said, there is an increasing trend of giving, that is philanthropy in our country. That is very good to know. But while we acknowledge that, and while we are, being happy about that, the Niti Aayog's estimation also shows that there is a deficit in, investing in the social sector, especially if you want to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goal commitments by 2020. We are kind of having, a shortage of 8 lakh crore per annum in 2021. And if the trajectory continues like this, we'll have around 10 lakh crore deficit for financial year 2026. And as we all know, our social sector spending is not so great when we compare to BRICS countries or OECD nations. What this means, like along with government, development is not just the responsibility of government, and all of us, all the 4 players in the process of development, that we at GRAM also believe, and most of us also understand, that state, corporate, civil society organization and community should come together if we really want to achieve all the developmental goals. In the last few years or few decades, if you just do a quick scan through the development sector and the CSO sector, we have witnessed charity donations. That is, it could be both institutional as well as individual charities. People were just simply giving to a noble cause and good organizations, etc. Then we started seeing more and more project-based grant in aids, what we call, like you need to have a specific project, specific plan, and some philanthropists or philanthropic organizations would give to money grant to the organizations. Then we started thinking, okay, rather than depending on the grant, and how we can start helping ourselves, like self-help movement started in 80s and 90s, and we kind of started fascinating about microfinance, actually, how a wealth can be created amongst the community by mutual and internal lending and credit and thrift activities. So that money to be used in solving people's problem, and as well as the civil society organization use some portion of it to sustain the efforts, actually. And subsequently, some of the organizations came out with the novel thoughts of development loans, like giving money to loan in the form of loan, not in the form of grant, but in the form of loan to solve their own problems. For example, it could be like if you have a toilet necessary of building a household toilet, if there is a government grant, but the grant is not sufficient, or until you get the government grant, you need to invest your money, and people in the rural area cannot do that. Again, some developmental organizations came out with a novel thought of development loans, actually. And now we are seeing all this impact investment, which is completely an output based investment. And some of the organizations started giving organization development funds or organization endowments just to create an organization and sustain an organization. And venture philanthropy we are seeing in these days, and social responsible investing is growing, especially in the CSR era, which probably I'm asked to talk more about that today. The CSR is increasing in our country, and even the report what our moderator talked about is also signifies it is increasing in the rate at the rate of 23% year on year, actually, and that's a good sign. And as well as now we are also moved to an era of social enterprise, creating social enterprises and initiating more and more social business, so that CSOs are the organization which endeavors to solve social problems will become self-reliant or self-sustainable instead of depending on some grant-making organizations. In fact, what I find in the CSR regime, the biggest change or the value addition happened to the development sector is we're increasingly talking about 3 I's, actually, which is innovation, impact, and more insights. So with the CSR, with the more technology background or people from different business background involving, so there is more and more need and ask for innovation. How you solve the same old problem in a different way, much more cost effectively and efficiently. And this is increasing question about the impact has started. And more importantly, so insights of many sectors and people are now available for the developmental sector also. I think there is, in fact, which was development was only subject of government and NGOs, which is now supplemented by corporates through all the CSR initiatives. So that's the big change or shift we are finding in the development sector in these days. Yeah, I'll stop here. My 2 minutes are gone and done, and I'm over to you, Sandeep ji.
Thank you, Basaraju. You really covered the entire gamut of various ways of giving, but these are not just these are not the only ones. I would love to hear Varunji's comments, thoughts about what are the innovative ways that are emerging in India right now.
Sir, if I can go last, I'm just getting off the noisy place. It'll be more quiet than.
Yeah, no problems, Varunji. Anuragji, if you could share about this most innovative, the latest and greatest impact bonds, and if you could help us understand these new emerging ways.
Definitely. Before I start, thank you, Sandeep ji and Kumar ji, for having me in this panel. And Rajuji touched upon all the key trends that we have seen over the last few decades in philanthropy. So I just have 1 or 2 comments on that, and then I can maybe talk about impact bond, which is like the most hottest and the most promising sort of instrument of change that could be really transformative for the development sector. So a few comments on how philanthropy has been changing over the last few decades. Especially the last decade, there have been 3 to 4 major transitions and pivot points, starting with India being the only and the first country to mandate to make it mandatory for companies to give out CSR. I think this was a bold move, and this essentially increased the contribution of corporates into philanthropy, which came with its own baggage. Although there were a lot more opportunities that were opened up, but there was a certain expectation that these CSR donors also got into the development sector. So that was one sort of landmark change. Another one was through technology adoption. Most of the retail donation was offline, but with advent of crowdfunding platforms like Keto, most of the retail donation that was happening online was aggregated, and we saw a peak over the last 5-6 years how that has grown. The diaspora and domestic retail donors contributing towards causes, and especially medical emergency causes. And then over the last decade, as Rajuji also mentioned, there's been a very increased interest from risk investors doing equity and debt investments, and they're taking interest into philanthropy. opening, new areas of socially responsible investing and venture philanthropy, where we are looking at NGOs that are more aspirational with more, appetite for funding, and also social enterprises which are for-profit entities but have very strong positive social and environmental impact. And then the most recent innovation came in the form of SEBI's take on social stock exchange. India being, the first one to say that, okay, let us create a stock exchange to help NGOs raise funds. And this is also another a very bold move to formalize the entire development sector and to open the the supply and formalize the supply to unlock more capital. Coming to in this grand scheme of things, how philanthropy has been changing, there's been one macro trend which we've seen is that earlier, I think before 2 or 3 decades, the philanthropy has been more trust-based and cause-based. And then with CSR, we talked about strategic philanthropy, but now we are talking about catalytic philanthropy. And the core idea is that philanthropy being very limited. So the data clearly shows that the demand and the supply of philanthropical capital, there's a huge gap in that. And with philanthropical capital being very limited, the big idea is that rather than philanthropic money being used to fund directly the projects, it should be used to catalyze more funds into the development sector, which is where the entire blended finance and impact bond uh, uh, comes into play. And impact bond, it's just a new way to finance impact. It falls under the pay for success model, where the donor is essentially saying that rather than funding for inputs and activities, I would fund only for the outcomes if and when they are achieved. And based on this commitment, they give out outcome payment guarantee against which a banker or an investor takes the risk. So there's a risk transfer that happens during an impact bond, and it's a very useful instrument that has been, tried globally over the last decade. And uh, and as of today, there have been more than 276 impact bonds with 7 8 large transactions in India. Again, it's a very new field. There's very good evidence that is accruing, and as part of Impact First, our goal is to democratize impact bonds so that even small to medium-sized NGOs who are doing great work on the ground can also raise funds through an outcome-based mechanism, and that has been sort of what we have seen. And just my closing comment would be that from a funder's point of view, there are a few things that we have learned is that there's an increased focus on data reporting, compliances, and also on the outcomes. So funders are no longer satisfied with just the intent and the cause. They would rather, fund the actual results. And I think this is a very good point, because very small to medium-sized NGOs who are actually doing good work, I think we can expect some leveling up, because now they can raise funds and increase their appeal to funders just based on the merit of their execution and results. So this is the trend that we are seeing from Impactverse. Happy to hear what the panelists see and their take on the philanthropy and their trends.
Thanks, Anuragji. As you mentioned that it's the philanthropy is changing from trust-based to catalyst philanthropy. That's a new word that I have heard. Earlier, we had always been thinking about equity, bonds, and stocks are only for-profit business. And we would love to hear from Hemanji about what is this social stock exchange that Anuragji said that India has already announced, and if you could delve further into the details. You're on mute.
You are on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. So first of all, thank you for having me. And I hope this is not just a conversation, but actually a journey that we together are embarking on. And after Dr. Basaraju and Anuragji, and they've covered most of the points that were to be covered. So I'll try and fill in the gaps. Right. So the social stock exchange, which is what I'm heading at BSC, it was announced in July 2019 by the Honorable Finance Minister, and we got permission to launch it in December of 2022, about 5 months ago, and we already have 15 NGOs that have registered. And the intent behind the social stock exchange actually is there is a lot of innovation happening in the philanthropic sector. There are the impact bonds, there are social impact funds, social venture funds. There are several initiatives that are happening. And the idea behind the social stock exchange is to supplement the existing ways of fundraising and hopefully access new pools of capital in the process. So if you think about the way fundraising happens today, it's mostly an effort where the fundraiser relies on a network or relies on individuals who go through their networks, attempt to raise funds. The idea behind the social stock exchange is to create a common platform where all these initiatives can be stitched together. And not just that, it making the whole process more transparent through the third-party social assessor being able to report on the outcomes and thereby actually enabling the impact bonds to be far more effective and making that whole process of pay for success being a norm rather than an exception. Right. Also, by virtue of being a stock exchange, we are, there are 3 crore demat account holders in this country, and it's increasing every day. The stock exchange also helps to socialize a lot of these innovative instruments, right? Like development impact bonds, the social impact funds. Also, one of the things that, so there are several other countries actually that have tried the social stock exchange experiment. Primarily, 2 models have been followed. The matchmaking model, where the platform serves more as a listing, a directory of projects and allows donors to look up projects, and a for-profit model, where social enterprise with a for-profit objective can raise capital on the platform. As Anurag ji said, this is the first time in the world that we are actually doing a far more comprehensive approach to a social stock exchange, where we not only have for-profit enterprises, we have not-for-profit enterprises. We are not looking at a pure matchmaking platform. We are actually looking at a platform where funds can be raised, they can be traded depending on the value that the investor is seeing in buying something that has a social impact. There is a regulatory framework. The capital markets in India are perhaps some of the more stable capital markets in the world. And by making the social stock exchange a part of the existing stock exchange rather than a standalone structure, we are actually enabling the regulatory framework to provide transparency and inclusivity, which are supporting the innovative instruments. And equally importantly, like I said in the beginning, the social stock exchange will also enable new pools of capital come to the philanthropic sector. And Dr. Basavaraju said there is a dire need to get more money into the social development sector because India needs, and therefore the social stock exchange, to my mind, will be catalytic in terms of being able to pull in new pools of capital. It's like I tell people, we are at version 1.0 for the social stock exchange. We have to move from it being an experiment to being a game changer in this country, and perhaps create a model that the world will follow and move away from the matchmaking and for-profit efforts that have been made in the past to a true social stock exchange that we are hoping to implement. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Sandeep ji. More discussions to follow.
Sure, that's really amazing to see how the principles that we had applied over the years for-profit businesses, how do we bring that transparency, accountability into social sector, and how to increase the network for donations to your individual network to 3 crores plus demat accounts that we have, and how to give exposure to those ideas and let them socialize through this stock exchange. Really unique. And I see that Varunji has turned his camera on, so I'm sure that he has reached his destination. So thank you for joining us again, Varunji, and good to see you live. So if you are stable now, if you could share your thoughts.
So I can, firstly, thanks a lot for inviting me on this. It's a great opportunity to interact with amazing leaders in the social space. We started Keto now almost 11 years back, which is around last 11 years. So fairly been, long-term, slow-running tortoise in this race of social impact, seen lots of journeys of ups and downs and people doing different things. In our view, what we've learned retail fundraising is extremely hard. Donation or post-based product. Nobody wakes up in the morning thinking that I'm going to give money. Especially when it comes to individuals, you constantly need to nudge, probe, follow up, and market to people to constantly get them to give money to open up their wallets. If you look at Google search or any search engine about number of people searching to donate, that number is minuscule. So it's fairly clear nobody is looking to donate, and only if you keep asking will they open up their wallets and their pockets. Our learning has been in India, the non-profit space is very hard to raise funds for retail from retail donors, primarily because how storytelling is done. People want to give funds to individuals more than to non-profits. People want to give funds to individual stories more than non-profits as well. So we believe that fundraising primarily can really scale in India when storytelling evolves to 1:1 model, where I know who am I giving my money to and who am I helping out on. And that's what we've seen is something that really scales at the well in India. That when I as a retail donor am giving versus a non-profit giving my give money and then the non-profit uses that funds to support a project or give to a project. So that's something that we've seen really work well at scale, number one. Number two, what we believe is scalable is if donors can be moved from a one-time activity to a monthly recurring activity. Because most nonprofits who use our platform, and that's been close to now in 11 years, more than 10,000 plus nonprofits, really struggle to retain donors that we acquire through our platform. So even if a campaign is done and they land up getting 2,000 people to donate and raise 30, 40 lakhs, 50 lakhs, barely out of the 2,020 land up during the second time. That's primarily because the journey of to acquire donors is easy, to retain them is hard, let me just put it that way. And most nonprofits in India don't have CRMs or quality software or team or bandwidth to help them basically manage and service the donors better. Primarily because in the social space in India, people are not paid well. It's looked at a space where compared to the US, where if you look at the social sector, people are paid, if not market, probably 20% less than market. But in India, the expectation that somebody should be working at half their market salary or 70% of their market salary when it comes to working in the social sector. So unless that really evolves and people are able to hire really quality talent, to retain donors is going to be extremely difficult or virtually impossible. So that is number two. Number three is that what we recommend to our non-profit partners is that rather than trying to get 2,000 people to donate and get, they raise 40, 50 lakh rupees, try and get only 200 donors, but push them to commit to do it every month on an auto debit basis. Because even though that 200 donors might lead to only 1 lakh rupees, over a long run, that has more value than, you getting 2,000 people to give 50 lakh rupees. Because if you build that strong habit of attracting donors and retaining them on a monthly basis and getting them to give you on a monthly basis, you will basically build those strengths internally to better manage and retain donors that you have. So that is what we recommend to our non-profit partners on our platform. So yeah, this is just a journey in a nutshell. A lot of it, other outside, has been covered by my fellow panelists over here.
Great. It's a great role that Keto is playing for attracting the donors to retaining them, making them recurring donors and increasing the donor base. It's pretty amazing to see how civil society organizations are using the power of our crowdfunding platforms. Also, corporate social responsibility, as Anurag ji mentioned, that the Indian government has mandated corporates to allocate money towards a certain percentage towards CSR. So these methods have gained massive popularity, but with applying for the CSR funds, as it is different for givers, it is also a different approach, and thinking is different for the way people have been approaching for getting those grants and CSR funds. So if we can go deeper into each of those topics, I would like to ask Dr. Basavarajuji. So looking ahead, what do you think is the biggest opportunity for the civil society organizations in the next 5 years to leverage this massive CSR fund that they can get?
Yeah. Of course, before talking about that,
Basavarajuji, your voice is breaking. Maybe you want to turn off your camera and see if that reduces the bandwidth.
is it okay now? It's better?
Yes, now we can hear you clearly. You may have to repeat the last couple of sentences.
Okay. Yeah, Sandeep, actually, while you want me to talk about opportunities the civil society has actually in the coming years. So especially I'm going to restrict my talk about the CSR, because I'm sure Hemanji and other panelists will talk about the social stock exchange, impact investing, and so on. But I'll directly try to touch upon the challenges we have, so that we can associate it with the CSR funding, so that we can side by side understand the opportunities, how we can translate these challenges into opportunities. One, in fact, we need to address spending on capital versus creating human or social capital. In fact, while to sustain the development, actually, what is more required is to create human and social capital, to develop human and social capital. But increasingly, we are also finding that there is more and more spending on the capital investment. I'm not denying that there is no need of infrastructure, funding on infrastructure, creating infrastructure, but how that infrastructure contributes to creating human and social capital is something we need to think. That is the biggest challenge I feel in the CSR sector we are facing. Second thing is the preferred geography versus proper geography. In fact, an analysis of the recent CSR data reveals that around 30% of the total CSR spent by the companies are in the state of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat, and Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Where I'm not saying the investment should not be made in these states, because I'm from one of the states which I read the name about actually. But we need to also find and invest the CSR in the preferred geography. It's proper geography. Even within the states, the concentration of spending is more around the industries and more in the urban areas, rather than where the aspirational districts are, wherein the development needs are more, or the less developed talukas or blocks, what we call actually. That is something we need to address. Then third, and the most important thing is the proven model versus novel model. Whenever the civil society organization goes for a fund request, actually, is the first thing asked by the grant maker or the CSR committee there is, okay, where is the proof of concept? Where do you want know how sure you are that your model is going to solve the issues or problems actually? While it is important to have the proof of concept, because if you look at what NGOs are contributing in the development sector, is creating a novel ideas, much more efficient, innovative ideas to solve the same age-old problem actually. So you need to experiment something new. And if you look at the CSR spent in 2021, it was around 24,000 crores. But if you compare it against the state and central government budget, we'll be surprised to know the CSR budget is only 0.28% of all government budget and 0.6% of Government of India budget. What I mean to say, it's not that whatever the investment being made by the private sector through the CSR route is not something very less, but it is important. But important if you invest on the innovative model to solve the same age-old problem in much more cost-effective and innovative way. For that, more trust and partnership is required to be offered to the civil society organization. And the next thing is leveraging to business versus leveraging business. How you leverage your business to solve the social issues. That's something to be thought. And ready-made development solution versus need-based solution. Many a times there is no time to understand, go to the field, do a proper need assessment studies, understand what could be the problem, and more importantly than understanding the problem, what could be the causes, the root cause of the problem. Unless we do a proper diagnostic study in a geographic area, we shall not understand, we shall not solve the problem in the long run. Actually, we would only be treating the symptoms. For example, the sanitation problem in one area, the reason for it could be absolutely different from the other area. Some areas it could be just due to a water issues. In some area it could be a socialization issues. So these kind of issues will only be understood when you go and do a proper need assessment. But we need to invest there. So you can't just do an year-on-year project. Actually, you need to have a long-term approach to solve social issues. And more importantly, than opting convenient route, we need to opt critical route of spending. What is most important, what is most necessary, where it is more important, that's something required to be done. See, what I foresee is, unless we address all these challenges, of course, there is an opportunity increasing social sector funding towards the CSOs, towards the developmental sector, but we may or may not use it wisely and more appropriately. That's something we need to think about actually. And it will be an opportunity if you understand and pursue the partnership with 3C principles, that is complementing strength beyond just financial resources, how we can converge resources, both technical and intellectual and financial. Actually, together we can achieve more and cohesion to the national and international development goals. So that's something we need to focus now. That is what the concerning things I find in when it comes to the CSR domain. Thank you, Sandeepji.
Yeah, great. I think as you touched upon that, even though CSR funding is much smaller if you compare it against the government, but they are playing a very crucial role in reaching out the last mile. And as you know, reaching out to last mile needs collaboration, that's the key to maximizing the effectiveness of reaching their goals for CSR initiatives. So how can companies establish a successful collaboration model with other stakeholders such as NGOs, government entities? As you said that any problem needs understanding of root cause, last mile delivery. So any examples where this collaboration has worked, if you can highlight the power of partnership for driving this impactful change through collaboration.
Yeah. So firstly, as I said, the partnership should be built on the 3C principles. That we need to truly respect the partner. In fact, while companies bring in financial resources, they also need to appreciate the CSOs community insights and their experience and working in the social sector and addressing the social issues. That is the experience resource or the knowledge resource the civil society organization bring into the table. While the recent laws kind of stipulates or restrict companies to plan year-on-year project as well as submit year-on-year and expenditure reports, but while you do that, it's better to plan a kind of a long-term relationship. Any social problem cannot be addressed or solved in 1 year. You need a consistent and sustained investment actually. So it is not spending, actually it's an investment. You're investing to in the community to enhance their social and human capital. That's something we need to understand. Have a long-term do a proper need assessments to study and draw a long-term plan and develop a theory of change. How you can change the scenario with your financial and intellectual investment. That is something is required. So there can be various models, but what I'm saying is, for example, we ourselves tried a model called Sugame Shiksha, wherein a government school to be turned around as a model school or an NEP compliant school. So wherein it requires to make an ordinary government school an NEP compliant school requires a sustained and continued handholding and resources. So that cannot be done in 1 year by just creating buildings. By creating buildings, infrastructure can be developed, but you will not have digital literacy, you will not have financial literacy, you will not have other 21st century skills that can be done overnight. It requires investing on teachers and long term. So those things we have also tried, and it worked actually. That's something because our funder had a kind of confidence on us, tried to encourage to try a novel idea, a new model also. That's something is very much required, I believe.
Thank you, Dr. Basavarajuji. Thank you for sharing all the insights, and it's a collaborative effort and long-term strategy is needed. Social problems cannot be solved in a year or two. Let's turn to Varunji. And as we know, Anuragji mentioned briefly about democratizing access to funds. And really the relatively older model in this has been crowdfunding, which is really to help democratize this access to capital, empower individuals and groups to bring their ideas to life. Crowdfunding has become really popular amongst individuals, as well as these days businesses are also using crowdfunding mechanisms. My own personal experience says that in Sewa International USA, during the second COVID wave, we had launched a campaign for oxygen concentrators, medical equipment, and within 2 weeks in USA, from USA donors, we raised
Your screen hanged. Maybe the amount was too big.
In 2022, $10 billion have been raised by crowdfunding by nonprofits. And I think if we include businesses as well as nonprofits, by 2025, they're expecting that this crowdfunding is going to go to $300 billion. So Varunji, we know that crowdfunding has really transformed the way individuals and organizations are able to contribute to philanthropy. If you can share some successful crowdfunding campaigns that have made a significant difference. You had mentioned a couple of things from Keto, how they have been helping, and what campaigns really succeed through crowdfunding versus with the other models of going CSR or impact bonds. What causes are more suitable for crowdfunding campaigns?
Yeah, so crowdfunding campaigns primarily revolve around the concept of many people coming and giving to a certain nonprofit. So I'll give you an example of something that's worked. And for me, definition of work is when it happens on a repeat basis, right? Anything which is only a one-time activity, like COVID, we saw, hundreds of crores getting raised and all kinds of nonprofits using a platform. But post-COVID, they've not raised anything. So I don't call that a change in behavior. It was an event, and nonprofits came, they raised funds, and after that, they stopped raising funds for such programs. Like an example I would like to give is a nonprofit called UNI that we've been working since the last almost 6 years, where they consistently have been raising money each and every year, and each and every year raising more and more funds. So this nonprofit based out of Bangalore, they have a large volunteering network where they get college students to come and do a volunteering program for a 4 to 6 week volunteering program that they have to do. It is a part online, remotely, and part offline at municipal schools. And this nonprofit year on year has basically expanded the volunteering network and got all their volunteers to come and crowdfund on campaign. And they do it also in a very effective way where they create a competition among these volunteers across I think across 4 states, where they compete at the state level, at the city level, and at a district level. So everybody in the district is competing with each other to raise the highest amount. Everybody in the city is competing with each other to raise the highest in the city. And then that rolls up into a state. So it creates a fairly uh, 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 competitive event over a period of 45 days in terms of what they'll end up raising. So when we started with them in the first year, they raised about 30 lakh rupees, 25, 30 lakh rupees about 5 years back. And last event they did about 1.5 CR. And they've consistently done more and more year on year. So that's been a great success story of a nonprofit who has uh, used crowdfunding effectively year on year and also scaled in that manner in terms of how they go about raising funds. And also at the same time, making sure they keep their costs low. So highest amount of funds can be used for the program. The other example I would like to give is about this nonprofit called Habitat for Humanity. Again, somebody that we've been working with consistently for a lot of years. What they've done is that they've gone and collaborated with all local international schools in India. And they've created a program where these international school students can go and volunteer at Habitat for 2 to 3 days. And in that spirit, after volunteering, they basically make these students do fundraising. And again, make it a competitive thing where their class 10 and division A, B, C, D, F, and students in those divisions, each student is competing with each other to raise funds, and then all divisions are competing with each other in terms of which division can raise the highest amount. And then, which class is the highest, 9th or 10th or 11th. So again, made it a very competitive, engaging activity. And again, year on year, Habitat is only done better. So this drives repeat, people coming in again, funds getting raised again. We've also had a nonprofit that has used us called World for All. It's a nonprofit that works for the cause of animals, where they've been able to convert a large portion of their donors from one time to monthly repeat, where they've been able to move donors through a program that we've created called SIP, Social Impact Plan, which is a monthly giving program, where every month they've been able to show to their donors that how they're helping a different animal and how their money goes to fund a animal treatment or more than one in certain cases. But they've been able to build a program to say that, hey, every month we'll treat, 20, 30 animals. And we will basically get people to commit towards funding a animal treatment. And then that every month, a donor can save an animal's life. And then because scale started getting larger, they started saying that, hey, we will help animal and rehabilitate that animal as well in the rehabilitation center that they've created. So again, moved a lot of, prior to that, it started about a year back. Prior to that, very focused around driving donations as a one-time activity. And what they saw was retention is extremely hard. So every campaign they would get 100 donors, 100 new donors. Only 2-3 of them would make the second donation. The rest would just, go out of the system. So moving, more and more donors and telling donors rather than give me 1,000 rupees one time, give me 200 rupees per month. So they start changing their pitch as well. Rather than asking 1,000 rupees one time, they start saying give 200 rupees per month. Start seeing donors become more engaged, and of course, give on a monthly basis. So these are some of the success stories that we've seen in the platform. And of course, we keep sharing best practices with all the nonprofits who are active on our platform to see how they can best use the crowdfunding network and use Seto to scale their fundraising.
Thank you, Varunji. You mentioned some Habitat for Humanity and other organizations that we closely partner with as well in USA. When it comes to organizations, there is more credibility because of their trust that they have already established. But with individuals, how can these crowdfunding efforts be more credible Is there a problem with credibility, transparency, accountability, which is inbuilt into the newer models of impact bonds, social stock exchange? But really for crowdfunding based models, how can that credibility be increased? Many a times individuals are raising funds, they are not aware about the tax implications. So regulations, and if you can shed some light on those aspects as well.
Sure. So, of course, all said and done, everything that we do is a learning journey, and only if you make mistakes when you learn to see how you can improve on them and get much better at it. So we've seen a lot of these instances where we realized by certain actors on our platform or other platforms as well to see how we can make this process more stronger and educate not only people raising funds on the platform but even donors, educating people, say for medical care, collaborating with hospital directly, adding hospital phone number, making sure an email goes out to the hospital every time a patient puts up information, now using AI to see if documents are photoshopped, making sure that we multi-collaborate with other crowdfunding platforms to flag the bad actors on it. So we've also taken a lot, I would say, and anything new that comes up anywhere in the world, will have its own challenges, be it even impact bonds or anything new. And it's a learning process, right? The goal is to constantly learn and improve and try and see that same mistakes or same gaps don't exist in the system that they existed before. And with more and more technology coming in play, these things will be in the favor of crowdfunding, where if even if we're not able to solve for 100%, we should be able to solve for 97, 98, 99%.
Thanks so much, Varunji. Let's turn to Hemanji. As we know that social stock exchange offers a new way to raise capital for social enterprises. So how do you, but it's pretty complex with the laws, regulations, and SEBI involved. So how do we envision the impact of the social stock exchange in transforming the landscape of giving in India for socially good? So what are the opportunities and challenges that you foresee for civil society organizations to really engage into this social stock exchange?
Okay, that's a great question, Liji, and I'll try and do justice to it. So first of all, a couple of conceptual things. One is there are probably more than 7 lakh companies in the country, right? Corporates, but only about 7,000 are there on the stock exchange, right? There are several reasons for it, but one of the key reasons is that being on the stock exchange means that you are responsible for public money that is being trusted to you. And therefore, there are additional compliances, additional disclosures that need to be adhered to ensure that you're being fully transparent with what's happening in your organization and especially in the projects for which you raise funding. So therefore, the first thing that I would like to highlight is that the social stock exchange on a one-to-one basis is not for every NGO or every social enterprise that is out there. And if you look at the criteria that's been set out by SEBI, there is a size criteria that's included. Second, the adjunct to that is however, we've also got collaborative and aggregative mechanisms that have been put in the purview of the social stock exchange, such as the development impact bonds, such as the social impact funds, where even smaller players can participate as long as the compliance and the governance is actually being taken care of by the aggregator, and they are taking care of the monitoring that is required at the smaller organization level. So therefore, we have, in a way, created a structure that will be more inclusive and will allow smaller organizations also to participate. The second thing is that to my mind, so one of the first things that we discussed, right? I think it was the very first meeting that we held of the working committee. The idea of a donation or a grant existing on a stock exchange somehow did not gel, right? The stock exchange is about financial return. It's not about social return, and a donation and a grant is not at all about financial returns. It's all about social return. And therefore, we created a bridge between the donation and the grant way of working and the stock exchange through this new instrument called the zero coupon, zero principle instrument. Okay? And the idea behind the zero coupon, zero principle instrument was that today, as people are donating money, can they do so on the stock exchange and be able to avail of the fact that you can give money to anybody, any organization, anywhere in the country. You can get complete transparency into what's happening with your funds, etc., etc. Right? So the zero coupon, zero principle instrument is a way in which we have bridged the existing social development ecosystem with what happens on the stock exchange, right? And this, by the way, has not been tried in any other country. And this is one of the things that we have done, from an innovation point of view. The third thing is that if you think about the way fundraising happens today, right? The fundraising effort essentially is something that an organization does by communicating the impact that they've created in the past, right? It's like it's almost like a mutual fund saying, I've done well in the past and therefore I'll do well in the future, which obviously there are caveats associated with that statement. However, oftentimes, and Basaraju talked about this trust deficit, right? The origin of the trust deficit is that the impact story that the not-for-profits talk about oftentimes does not have a third-party validation. Right? And therefore, one way of overcoming that trust deficit is the introduction of the social assessor or social auditor, whatever you want to call that third party. So through zero coupon, zero principle instruments, through the introducing the concept of a social auditor or a social assessor, and creating something called the capacity building fund. The capacity building fund essentially is a fund which is the mandate to that fund is to build awareness and build capacity amongst the not-for-profits about how to avail of the social stock exchange. These three measures have been implemented to ensure that any teething issues that might be there in taking up the social stock exchange are ameliorated. To my mind, actually, the true future of the social stock exchange is not in the zero coupon, zero principle instrument, right? Because those are systems that work today. To my mind, and I'm really looking at Anurag ji when I say this, the real answer is actually in the hybrid instruments. And the social impact, development impact bond is one example, right? The true power of the stock exchange actually lies in being able to bring like-minded organizations together, not for profit and for profit, and create a far larger impact than would have been possible offline in the offline world, right? And allow more donors, more investors to participate in the story, right? We talked about zero coupon, zero principle, providing only a social return. What if you had an instrument out there that gave you a financial and a social return and created a far larger social impact than either would have been able to do individually? The social stock exchange will allow you, an organization to raise funding that way, right? So therefore, I think there's a lot more coming as far as the social stock exchange story goes than what we've talked about so far. So back to you, Sandeep.
Thank you. That's really detailed, as it's really I would think it's an extreme form of donation by results contract. So, but it's very tough on both sides, because how do we choose right organizations, and when the organizations fail to deliver their forecasted outcomes, then they cannot get the required beneficiary flows, or investors risk losing their money. So any tips for both organizations, NGOs, as well as investors to how do you minimize risk? You touched upon some of the aspects of third-party auditors. In USA, we have charity navigator like rating agencies. But any additional tips how both organizations and investors reduce the risk of failure?
That's so. Two or three things. I don't think there's a definitive answer to that question, to be honest. And I think COVID has amply demonstrated that there are unforeseen risks out there. But any social development project inherently has inbuilt risks, just like any corporate raising money has inherent inbuilt risks. If you think of the offline world, so if a CSR, if you take Dr. Basaraju's example, you have a CSR donor that is giving money to an NGO to run a school in a particular village, right? That will, and the agreed upon objective was that 100 kids would be able to get educated in one financial year. There was flooding in that school, right, which was unforeseen when the project was conceptualized and funded. But the flooding happened, and that resulted in loss of time as far as the school is concerned, loss of livelihood of the parents that were sending their children to school, and a variety of other impacts. Right. Today, that situation is managed through a dialogue. Right. The donor and the implementation agency actually are a community. They're not two individuals. Right. They talk to each other. And I think as a part of the social stock exchange, it's very important that we don't lose that community. I think it's one of the best risk mitigation efforts that can happen. You obviously have the past track record, you have the third-party validation, you have the annual reporting, you have the disclosures that are happening on a continuous basis on the stock exchange, all of which act as risk mitigation efforts, right? But I think the big, by far the largest one is the community that needs to be created around the social stock exchange. And I think all of us have a role to play in doing that. And I'm sure when Varun talks about Keto, a part of his journey has been in creating not just a transactional platform, but actually creating a community. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Hemanji. Let's turn to Anuragji. Hemanji already alluded that the answer lies in collaboration. It's not just one model, but a hybrid model by bringing together public, private, and social sector stakeholders. And though these social impact bonds are relatively new financial instrument, they really have the potential to revolutionize the way we think about social impact. And 35 plus countries are already implementing this. You mentioned that there are 250 plus projects in India alone. So the possibilities are infinite. From your perspective, how can civil society organizations harness these platforms to bring out meaningful transformations in the communities that they serve through these social impact bonds?
Sure. So correcting one fact, there are 276 impact bonds globally. In India, there have been only 7 to 8 leading transactions. And I personally think that impact bonds will be very revolutionary, as Hemanji also pointed out, because we are talking about unlocking capital that is predictable and programmatic, which is very useful for NGOs because they have programs running across months and even years. And by unlocking additional investor capital, so by investor capital, we are essentially talking about the entire financial services, NBFCs, banks, and that is a large pool of capital. And if we open that tap, to NGOs or to the other development sector through impact bonds, then I think we can see very interesting dynamic happening on the macro level. And definitely there are certain barriers and certain bottlenecks to it. There needs to be risk mitigation, like Hemanji also mentioned. There are a few innovative risk mitigating tools such as guarantees, insurance, outcome-based insurance that have been tried globally. There's an active conversation going on around creating tax exemption for these investors to participate as an incentive to make these impact bonds and these opportunities more attractive for them to participate. And also there's a lot of flexibility that people try to integrate into the impact bond. For example, if the first tranche or certain outcomes are not being achieved due to some external factor, then can that impact bond course correct? Can we include more metrics? Can we relax certain targets? Can we include more NGOs or more service providers, or relax the scope of the work? So those flexibilities, risk mitigation, and incentives collectively will pave the way forward for investor participation. To answer your question, how can CSOs participate? I'll answer that in a while, but again, on a very macro level, there are five broad bottlenecks and also opportunities for impact bond. Whenever we're talking about democratizing impact bond or institutionalizing impact bonds, essentially, again, so one good example is microfinance. Like when it started 25 years ago, it was just an experiment. So Mohammed Yunus basically said, let us give out loans to poor people. They have no cash flow, no cash collateral. It made no sense. But right now, every public and private bank is into microfinance. So we are expecting a similar sort of institutionalization when it comes to impact bond, but there are certain bottlenecks that we need to be aware about. So from our understanding, research, and sort of interaction that we have had in the space, there are five categories of bottlenecks that we need to navigate. First is related to cost, complexity, and timing issue, and this is where a lot of standardization, templatization, and platform-based approach will help, reducing the cost to design and implement these structures. So this is one challenge that to a great extent impact first have solved. Then we talk about the funders' trust and perceived risk. So as the number of transactions globally are increasing, and also the evidence around impact bond is increasing, uh, both the donors and investors are getting aware about impact bond, but still there's a high perceived risk regarding participating or regarding giving money to these NGOs or participating in impact bonds. And I think to address this, SEBI has taken a great and a landmark sort of initiative by talking about social auditors, standardizing impact reports, and really opening up the market to create that trust into the system, so that these funders are more open to participating in these sort of instruments. And as we see more such instruments being coming out, and we'll have track record of NGOs, track record of different impact bond issuers that will feed into more rating systems that would further formalize this field. And then the third bucket of challenge / opportunity relates to the policy and regulatory landscape. And there are certain issues that we really need to get our hands around. For example, issue related to tax and accounting treatment of these impact bonds. Do we need a special purpose vehicle, or how would it affect the P&L or balance sheet of different stakeholders? And then also the cross geography fund flow. So over the last in the recent few years, there's been a FCRA has been an issue, and government had been very hard on FCRA. But if not FCRA, then maybe through the FDI or the other investment route, can we really unlock foreign capital, either as outcome funding or risk investment, participating in an in impact bond or some other sort of fund listed on social stock exchange? So we need some work on that side as well. And then another dimension for the risk investor point of view would be talking about RBIs and role of private sector lending with NBFCs. Can they get any tax exemption if they are investing in NGOs? Because the money is being used by NGO. Do they get any tax exemption either on their investment or on the capital gain that they will make if the project succeeds? So there's a bucket of regulatory challenges, and we need to align these different regulatory bodies. So MCA, Ministry of Finance, SEBI, RBI, and only when we see an synchronized sort of effort towards this, then we can really expect massive unlocking of capital towards these innovative structures. And then the fourth pillar of challenge or sort of opportunity is around the capacity of NGOs. So as Himanshu also mentioned, there are 15 NGOs that are currently registered. But in India, more than 3 million entities are registered as non-profit. Like even if an NGO Darpan has around 1.5 lakh NGOs. So where are these NGOs? Like, and how many of them are ready to be funded through impact bonds? And there's clearly a recognition in the fact that capacity is lagging, but what are we doing about that? So there are funds that are created and there are a lot of capacity building activities that are happening. But I think we still need to integrate more technology and do a lot of awareness just to bring these organizations who are doing great work on the ground. But when it comes to managing data, reporting that data, that is still somewhere we are a little far behind. And Varunji, like mentioned, because of the low salaries and different issues, that has been a challenge where if we level up, then we'll add more supply both to the social stock exchange and also to the possible impact bond and social venture funds that will be creating. And the last bucket of challenge and the opportunities is everything related to impact pricing and measurement. And here, there are few good initiatives globally. For example, there's this impact genome registry, where there's this entity based in US and Canada. They verify outcomes of different NGOs, and these outcomes are then priced, and different stakeholders can buy those outcomes. Similarly, in UK, government has released outcome rates across different sectors. So this is equivalent to saying, government, just like they set MSP for different commodities, different rates for different banks to, synchronize among themselves. We can actually have certain rates to help stakeholders, funders, NGOs agree on certain prices that would further crystallize the transactions happening on social stock exchange, or also to help us, value an impact bond. And then the entire measurement issue. So I think so SEBI's report was really an anchor. I really, gave up my career and decided to take a plunge because it is such a remarkable effort and initiative. So the entire standardizing the impact report, I think this is a very game-changing effort, because right now the top 5% NGOs, they get more than 80% of the donation. It is network based, it is branding based, it is advertising based. But when we look at the real capital markets, there is speculation, but we do have 3 financial statements that every company releases, and there's a performance that is matched across different themes, regardless of sector, regardless of size. So having an impact report mandated and standardized would really give us benchmark for all investors, funders, and NGOs to really stand out and have some more rigor and data behind the actual work that is going on. And that would really further, formalize the entire ecosystem. And maybe we'll see, the development sector, which right now, or maybe in the past, has been the financial sink, becoming a very productive actor in the entire economy and leading the path towards the entire development agenda. So these are my sort of 5 cents, 5 broad areas where we think we need to, work on, and this will really move the needle for the NGOs and CSOs.
Thanks so much, Anuragji. I think impact bonds really have the promise for taking on these social challenges, but at the same time, it is so complex. So scaling up is a huge challenge for everyone, for NGOs to understand and for the investors. So you touched upon few aspects. Any top 1 or 2 tips for what specific changes need to happen in the way we can achieve these 5 broad areas that you have mentioned? What key drivers we should focus on about how to do it?
Yes. So your point on complexity, I think this is our job to, make these transactions more simpler and affordable. And other than the 5 buckets and its intermissions within those buckets, I think at this point in time, we would just like SEBI's openness and strong intent to make the environment more favorable. I think we need more experimental and more innovative funders and risk investors to come up and be open to do a few experiments, so that we all as a community can learn how these transactions are really helping, not helping, and what are the areas where all we can work together. I think in the next 1-2 years, it is about learning about these instruments and about the ecosystem that we are in. And again, it will be a combination of regulation. Like, for example, impact bonds are not illegal as per law, but still different acts are silent on their treatments, and there can be right incentives that could be set in place. So regulation is key piece. Technology and complexity, we are taking care of it. We just need more, awareness on these innovative models that have been worked, and these innovative structures are being adopted globally. Like, so there's a very strong rationale, and there's a very strong need for these instruments, and there's an aggregated power also, like for the very small grassroots enterprises. I think when we have them in an umbrella of an impact bond, and then make them more outcome focused and build capacity as they are being funded, I think that would really level up and bring all of these CSOs together and move upward in terms of their capacity. So again, summarizing, it will be a mix of a lot of things, but what we really need at the moment is more openness on exploring these innovative instruments, and a willingness to experiment and learn, and productive learning is very important. So whatever we learn, we need to make policy recommendation based on them, and set the right incentives and also disincentives to make sure that the impact is happening and that impact matters. So that will be my sort of summary.
Great.
And just one last. So I personally am very bullish on the entire NGOs. The reason is India has the highest number of NGOs globally, and NGOs per capita in India is more than schools and hospitals per capita. So, and having said that, and given the scale, I think NGOs are also the most underutilized asset. And I think these instruments could help us realize the value of these assets. And I'll just end it here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a collaboration that must happen with volunteers, NGOs, philanthropists, and investors. Only then a social change is possible. As we know that we are conducting this discussion in the context of G20. So just a quick question for everyone, if you would like to offer any recommendations for the world leaders, as we will be summarizing these discussion points and sharing with the world leaders. So please feel free to share your insights and ideas how these world leaders can nurture philanthropy and encourage growth on a global scale. So first, if we could have Varunji to share any quick recommendations.
Yeah, my quick recommendation is that how do we create a global network or a global process of how to look at all these non-profits and how to validate them, measure impact, because different countries have different mechanisms and processes of how impact, like someone mentioned, example of Charity Navigator, right? So it can, the learning of Charity Navigator, we have not tried it in my 11 years team. I've not been successful. But yeah, can there be a global standard benchmark, like how we are accounting, like GAAP and stuff, that where we can look at non-profits across the world. Second is that when it comes to even laws around capital movement, again, how can we have G20 countries having a similar framework, right? Because like today, US allows, like India will challenge a foreign fund with SCRA, but US or UK or Australia opens free border to raise financing and funding, and thereby which a lot of people who might want to give to India are not able to give to India because of the strict laws around foreign financing, and all that capital just goes to countries that don't need it actually, like the US or UK. So that's the second thing. And third is that how do we create some kind of a global a training body around people and talent, right? I think in a lot of other industries, in finance or banking or accounting, that has been done, but it's not been really done in the impact space. So how do we create talent pools for now and future and these talent pools can are common, our common certification to work not only in India but outside India as well, because that just gives more people to enter the social space. Just like in IT, you become an engineer, you work in TCS, in process for a few years, then you get opportunity to go to TCS in the US. So there's constant growth opportunity for you as a person. And how can that happen in the social space as well? So if I'm certified, how do I get opportunities to work across all G20 countries? So a common certification this provides me more employment opportunities in other G20 and also to get different.
Thank you, Varunji. Hemanji, any quick comments from you? You're on mute.
Yeah. So just to add to what Varun said and what Dr. Basaraju had said in the beginning, government is the largest social development funder by far, right? And if some of that funding can be outcome based, can be pay for success kind of a model, I think the effectiveness and efficacy of those funding will be far greater. So their support in terms of moving some of their funds to be an outcome funder would be great. Second would be that a lot of the regulation, especially in India, but in other countries also, is often driven by the bad apples, right? And FCR is, I think, a good example of that. And we sometimes forget that in the overall interest of the ecosystem, there has to be some tolerance and some latitude that needs to be given within the regulatory framework. But I think rather than being driven by the bad apples, if you promote the good apples, then perhaps the bad apples will fall over. Third would be something that has been spoken about before. I think Varun alluded to it, as well as Anurag alluded to it, which is the need for standards. The need for standards in terms of outcomes, in terms of impact measurement, the need for a language, a lexicon that is common. And I am hoping actually that the Social Stock Exchange can drive some of that work. And finally, one of the things that I was very delighted about in this whole Social Stock Exchange process was the openness with which SEBI approached the whole thing. Okay, being a capital market regulator with very little exposure to the social development ecosystem, the SEBI team was extremely open, extremely amenable to ideas, new ideas, different way of doing things. And this support for innovation, I hope, continues and is not just restricted to SEBI, but even other countries and the governments take this route. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hemanji. We'll have to move a little quicker. Anurag ji and then Basavaraju ji, if you could please share.
So I'll be very short. All the major points have been covered. Just echoing them very briefly. I think aligning on impact standards is one. Second is having a global rating mechanism or global filtering mechanism to help us rate impact bonds or rate NGOs or their track record based on their capabilities. I think that will be very helpful. And the third would be enabling cross-border fund flow. I think I see these three as the biggest bottlenecks. And I think if we all countries, stakeholders from different countries come together and converge towards a global standard for all of these three themes, then we can have some very interesting things happen in the space. Over to you, Basavaraju ji.
Yeah, thank you, Vijay. First thing I would biggest ask from the NGO sector, CSO sector would be a need for proper classification. In fact, it's very difficult to classify between development organization, civil society organization, non-government organization, and those things actually. That is the reason if you ask, okay, the number of organizations, CSOs available, some people will say 30 lakh organizations are there, but where are those 30 lakhs? But if you go and properly identify, not even 1/3 of active organizations are available. So because we are completely merging, even the federations of SHGs are considered as NGOs actually. So that's something a biggest problem we have. That is a policy ask. We think we should have it. Second thing is an unified mechanism or a portal to register development and active working development organization. And third is importantly enabling regulatory mechanism, which is facilitative. So we need to have some regulatory authority to manage and facilitate NGO organizations. And fourth is we need to especially recognize and respect the givers. The philanthropists should get a proper recognition and the benefit. So I think there are some I don't know, it's not a confirmed news, but if ATG goes away, but whether people have enough interest to continue to be philanthropists, to give part of a share of their income, whatever the salary income or a meager income they earn, so towards the development and social costs. And I think event like a festival of giving, a Dhan festival and all, should be kind of a nationalized or scaled up to the national level. That spirit of community philanthropy. I think actually, if you ask me what is the model we should ape, we should continue than learning anything from the West. We need to probably bring back our own the community philanthropy model. That is the only sustainable model. If we help each other, that is the only sustainable model. And NPO should also be encouraged to be self-reliant. While we are talking about social enterprise, etc., but our laws are actually on the other hand restrictive. You cannot earn above some percentage to continue to be a not-for-profit organization in India. I think that's something, on one way you expect organizations to be self-reliant, but on the other way you restrict them to be self-reliant. These kind of laws should be kind of revisited, and kind of an enabling and facilitative environment should be fostered so that government and civil society organization too can work together in achieving national and international goals.
Great. Thank you so much. As we come to conclusion for this very insightful panel discussion, I would like to take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to Varun Sethi-ji, Anurag Gangwar-ji, Hemant Gupta-ji, Dr. Basavaraju-ji for their invaluable contributions. Your insights have been truly inspiring. You have shed light on transformative power of philanthropy through your experience, sharing the experiments in various domains. I would also like to express my sincere thanks and appreciation to all the virtual attendees. We have a lot of knowledge that we have gained today, and we need to continue this journey of philanthropy and making a positive and lasting impact in the lives of individuals and communities worldwide by taking action. So whatever we have learned, we need to turn it into action. And finally, I would like to extend our gratitude to G20 World Leaders who are visiting India and are present there for their consideration and support in promoting philanthropies and creative avenues to foster giving in their respective countries, because only together we serve better, which is the motto of Sewa International. Once again, sincere thanks to all the panelists and virtual attendees. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste. Bye.
Thank you.